State governments all across Australia are giving tens of thousands of dollars of handouts for first home buyers. Stamp duty concessions, but also just cold hard cash. Let's go through state by state how much they're giving, and then let's explore whether you should go ahead and actually take the free money, or should you be a little bit more measured and invest instead? The answer might surprise you.
Welcome to the Oz Property Investment Mastery Podcast. My name's PK and I help busy people build passive income by buying top 5% growth and cash flow property and build a portfolio using data without wasting months doing research, spending weekends at inspection or catching flights, or dropping $10,000 to $20,000 on buyer's agents every single time. So if you're confused, lack confidence, and just overwhelmed with all the information and marketing misinformation available online and don't know where to start, then this show is for you.
Let's just go through state by state real quick. So in New South Wales, the government is giving $10,000 as a first home buyer grant, and there's also stamp duty concessions for purchases up to $1 million. In Victoria, it's a $10,000 grant and stamp duty discounts for up to $750,000 first home buyer purchase price. In Queensland, it's a $30,000 grant and stamp duty discounts up to $800,000. In WA, it's a $10,000 grant and duty discounts up to 600,000. South Australia, $15,000 grant and discounts on stamp duty up to 700,000. In Tasmania, $10,000 grant and stamp duty discounts up to 750,000. ACT is a duty discount for all purchases regardless of purchase price, and in Northern Territory, it's a $50,000 grant. So, the stamp duty concessions are not nothing, and also the grants are all the way from like 10 to $50,000 plus. So it's really tempting, especially because I know it's hard to save a deposit. And so it's like, well, why should I invest in property? Why not just utilize the free money that the state government is giving me? Let's go through 4 or 5 reasons that I really want you to know because you might be making a massive mistake. Let's say you're in Victoria. Let's say you live in Melbourne, okay, or Sydney for that matter. And you're like, okay, I'm getting 10, maybe $20,000 of stamp duty reduction. Let's also say that I'm also getting actually 10,000 or $20,000 of handouts from the state government. It's taken a long time for me to save money. Why should I not do this? Here's one reason why you shouldn't do this, okay? And think twice about it. Basically, if you buy, let's say, in the wrong area in Sydney, sure, you've availed the free money that the state government is giving you. But if that property is stagnant, as much of Sydney is, in fact, right now, as I record this, it's dropping. Median values, take it with a grain of salt. Same as Melbourne, of course, median values are dropping. If you buy the wrong property, then in a year's time or in 2 years' time, that property may actually be worth less than what you purchased it for. And okay, fine, let's say it does increase. What is the opportunity cost of that? If you had instead said, okay, I'm not going to be blinded or tempted, I should say, by the state government handouts. Instead, I'm going to invest. I'm living here in Sydney, living here in Melbourne. I'm going to invest somewhere in WA, in Queensland, South Australia, or even in New South Wales or Victoria, but instead of like the neighborhood where I would probably want to not want to live in, but have to live in because that's all I can afford. Instead, I'm going to invest remotely, maybe regional or in another part of town. And if you use data to optimize that buying decision, then okay, you haven't received the $20,000 of free money from the government because you invested, you didn't buy to live in. And sure, you didn't get a stamp duty concession, so maybe you're down 30, 40, $50,000. Seems like a waste of money, right? Like, why not utilize that? But in a year's time, in 2 years' time, if that property that you invested in actually goes up by 100, 200, $300,000, then doesn't it make sense? Like, I've been talking about this for years and years and years. Of course, there are some exceptions. Maybe the area that you actually want to live in and, you get that stamp duty concession, you get the free money from the state government. Maybe the area that you can afford and want to live in, let's say metropolitan Sydney or Melbourne, maybe that's actually a fantastic location to invest as well, but the chances of that happening are like less than 2%. Okay? So I'm not saying don't utilize that free money, but I'm saying that the odds of you making money and saving money are very slim, okay, based on location selection. Instead, even though it's really painful to say no to free money, actually, most times it makes a ton of sense to say, "No, I'm not going to buy to live right now." In fact, I don't even wanna live in these areas. Like, most people, let's be honest, most first home buyers, you can afford somewhere up to $1,000,000, let's say you're in Sydney or Melbourne, and chances are you don't really wanna live in those locations, like, you actually wanna live somewhere where you can't afford. So you're just making the best use of a bad bargain, really. You're making compromises, and then in making that compromise, if you're also, choosing a location that isn't growing in value, then there's huge opportunity costs that you've left on the table. Instead, you could have foregone that free money from the state government, stamp duty concession, invested elsewhere, and in the same time period, 1, 2 years, made another $200,000-300,000. So that's one reason you should forego that free money. The second is the impact on borrowing capacity. Now, chances are, once again, if you're looking to buy in Sydney or Melbourne and you've utilized or you want to utilize the stamp duty concessions and free money from the state government, then those properties are heavily negatively geared. And so I know that you're buying to live, all right? I get that. You're not buying to invest. But the thing is that you might have in the back of your mind that, you know what, PK, after 6 months, after 12 months, I'm hacking the system. I'm going to get the handouts and I'm going to make it an investment property. We get this. If you don't get the location selection right, we already talked about that, leaving money on the table. But even if you do make it an investment after 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever it is, these locations, the yield in Sydney, Melbourne is gonna be like 2%, 3%. It's gonna cost you 30 to 50 to $80,000 every year just to hold that property on a yearly cash flow basis. No one wants that, alright? So, that is a terrible idea. That is just sucking up into and eating away all that free money that you received from the state government. So, once again, it makes sense to instead say, "No, I'm not going to be tempted by that free handout. Instead, I'm gonna buy interstate or remotely somewhere else as a pure and simple investment property." That's the second reason. So, there was the lack of growth or opportunity cost of growth. The second reason is really around the negative gearing aspect. And the third thing is borrowing capacity. If you're buying these 2-3% yield, I know initially you have to live in it to get that, all the handouts. But if you make it an investment property after 1 or 2 years, that thing is gonna basically suck you dry in terms of borrowing capacity because the yield sucks so much. All right. So that means that your investment journey is basically capped out because you bought this 2%, 3%, 3.5% yielding property in Sydney, Melbourne. The bank says, look, it's costing you an arm and a leg. And realistically as well, like from a cash flow perspective, household budget perspective, you're not going to have the ability to buy any more properties. So from a borrowing capacity perspective, you shot yourself in the foot as well. That's the third reason. And then the fourth reason is you might be thinking, well, I'm going to game the system. I'm going to get my, freebies from the state government, my stamp duty concessions, and I'm going to sell that thing after a year, after 2 years. And in that way, bada bing, bada boom, I've got my free money and then I can start my investment journey later on. But here's the thing, in Australia, the transaction costs of buying and selling property really makes flipping a really difficult and cost prohibitive strategy. And every time you buy, There's legal costs, there's stamp duty. Sure, you get concessions, but you still might have to pay something. And then when you sell, you've got to pay your capital gains tax. There's agent fees, which can be like, up to 1.5 to sometimes 3%. There's legal fees, there's other things as well. It's not like the States where it's capital gains tax is negligible, transfer duty or stamp duty is negligible. It's much more liquid market. In Australia, it's not like that. So if you're thinking you're gaming the system by just flipping that property after a year of obligatory holding, to satisfy the government that, yeah, I did live in there and therefore I got the freebie handout. The chances are you wouldn't have made money anyway in a year or in 2 years' time post-tax. So that kind of argument, in a lot of respects, goes out the drain. So that's the fourth argument for really saying, I know it's a tough decision. I know you don't like me to talk about it. You don't like me to tell you that this is the right thing to do, but really the right thing to do is to in 95% of the cases just take a deep breath and say, I'm going to say no to the stamp duty concessions. I'm going to say no to the government handouts that 10, 20, $30,000 for my first home buyer, subsidy or grants. Instead, I'm going to build real wealth because those properties, entry level properties, I don't want to live in them anyway. Like, forget about the math and the financial side of things. It's not really an amazing location or property that I can afford anyway. Instead, why don't I rent this? Instead, I know it's a bitter pill to swallow. I'm going to say no to the stamp duty concessions and government handouts. Instead, I'm going to use data to invest my hard earned money in affordable locations, maybe interstate, maybe in the same state, but in a location completely away from me. I'm not saying remote location, but you buy remotely, and in that way, I'm actually going to build wealth. Then in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years' time, deploying the right strategy, rent vesting, I'll continue to rent in the location I actually like from a lifestyle perspective, because renting is most times or oftentimes location dependent, cheaper than actually buying, especially with high interest rates at the moment. I'm going to continue rent vest, and through delayed gratification, I'm going to be able to buy my dream home. Okay. Instead of just being suckered in by the free government handouts and then being negatively impacted by a lack of growth, by a hit on my borrowing capacity, terrible yield, and then high costs if I were to choose to flip it. Hopefully, this makes sense. I know there's exceptions, and I know that sometimes people do make a lot of money by, getting those handouts from the government, staying in a place for 12 months. And like I said, there's like a Venn diagram. There might be some instances where there's concentric circles, where you can actually afford in the local area that you live in, and the other circle concentric, it overlaps where the data is actually fantastic and the thing's going to go up in value. But to find that overlap between those two circles is incredibly difficult and incredibly rare, especially if you're talking Melbourne and Sydney. So if you're listening from Melbourne, Sydney, or anywhere really, think about it. Don't be tempted by these government subsidies. Use financial literacy to get ahead over the medium term, over the long term. You will do much better. I can tell you so many stories of my clients, non clients as well, people who did forego those stamp duty concessions. They did forego the government handouts, state government handouts, and they're so much better off for it right now. Let's say they were living in Sydney instead, they bought in Brisbane, then they used that property equity to buy another one in Perth and Adelaide, etc., etc. Fast forward 3 to 5 years, they've been able to sell down part of their portfolio and then buy their dream home in Sydney. Whereas if they had just gone ahead and utilized the stamp duty concessions and government handouts to buy their first home in Sydney, all they could have afforded was like in Parramatta, like an apartment. And then in the subsequent 3 or 4 years, that apartment had gone flat. And so they wouldn't have been in that situation to be able to afford their dream home. in 3 to 5 years' time had they latched on to the government handouts. So, guys, no one cares about your money as much as you do. Definitely not the federal government, definitely not the state government. Make sure you do the math, understand the modeling, understand your financial future, understand what property can do for you. That's what I'm trying to help you with. To level up, I'll leave links below to my Facebook group with more than 60,000 people, Australian Property Mastery with PK, and also to my podcast, Oz Property Mastery on Spotify, Apple, and also where else is that? YouTube Music. Hit the subscribe button, guys. Hopefully this brought you value. Give it a subscribe, give it a like, and let me know if you have any comments or thoughts. My name's PK. Thanks for being with me. See ya.